Hey, thanks for tuning in. This will be the full breakdown on the book of Daniel, straight into chapter 1. Daniel chapter 1, it really seems to be just setting up the context for the overall story of Daniel. It talks about the historical context, it'll talk about some cultural context, and then it'll bring in our, four people that the book follows along. So I'll assume you've read it before. If you haven't, feel free to pause the video, read through chapter 1, and I'll start breaking it down now. So chapters 1 through 6 are fairly straightforward. Let's talk about verse 7. Unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belteshazzar, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. Now the first question is always, why did they change the names? So giving names to captives or foreign slaves was a sign of their being put unto subjection. Let's talk about the names and the second reason why they did that. Daniel's name means God is judge. He gets renamed Belteshazzar, meaning preserve thou, O Bel, his life, or the prince of Bel. Bel culturally was the Babylonian god at that time, among others. It is explained 6 times in 12 chapters that Daniel's name got changed, implying that Daniel probably did not like his new name. I know that I would not. He uses his own name 75 times in this book. Hananiah, meaning gift of the Lord, his name gets renamed to Shadrach, meaning command of Aku, who was their moon god. Mishael, meaning who is what God is, gets renamed to Meshach, who is as Aku. And Azariah, meaning whom Jehovah helps, renamed Abednego, servant of Nego or Nebo, the god of science and literature. So they do this to, help control, or just another way to really persecute them and influence them and beat down their morale. And they change their names. They change what they call them to names not that worship the Hebrew God at the time, but of their own God, or gods rather. Verse 8, Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now it could be there were things on the table, or food that they were given to eat that was not clean for them to eat. In the law of Moses, it would probably contradict that law and go against that. It could be that the meat was not butchered properly, or it could be that it was meat sacrificed to idols, which they were forbidden to eat, of course, in the Pentateuch. It is worth pointing out that Daniel's case is quite similar to Joseph's case in late Genesis. They're both captives from their own people. They receive favor from the captors. They interpret dreams, and we'll talk about that later on. They get exalted by their rulers, again, later on. And they're both very righteous men, despite the temptations, or the burden too. So it says in verse 12, they give them pulse to eat. What is pulse? Pulse comes from the Hebrew word zeroim, meaning seeds, that which is sown. It is consisted of vegetables and grains, wheat, barley, rye, peas, beans, lentils. It does not mean it was a strict vegetarian diet, but that they could not legally eat of meats not probably killed and dedicated. Verse 14, he consented to them in this matter and proved them 10 days. 10 days is not a long time, so God was truly at work here and blessing them, giving them his favor. Because in 15, at the end of 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh. Verse 17, as for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. And then the chapter ends off on a high note. Verse 20, in all matters of wisdom and understanding, the kings inquired of them. He found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in his realm. So on to chapter 2. Let's see. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. He wants his astrologers and magicians to not only interpret his dream, but tell him what he dreamt, right? And they obviously can't do that. So Daniel, obviously through God, he's able to do this, right? Verse 36, this is starting on the interpretation. So he starts breaking down the dream, right? And he explains, starting in verse 38, that he says, you are the head of gold at the very end of 38. and the U is Babylon, right? The Babylonian kingdom represents the head of gold. And there'll be another kingdom inferior to thee. That's going to be the Medo-Persian kingdom. And another third kingdom of brass, which is the Grecian kingdom. And a fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron. That's the Roman Empire. 41, he talks about the feet of the kingdom. It's going to be part iron and part potter's clay. And those two aren't going to mix. And as they don't mix, they shall not cleave one to another, right? And that's going to represent a future empire. That will represent the revised Roman Empire. I say revised Roman not because it will be called Roman, but it will be in the same area as the Holy Roman Empire. And it'll consist of the nations or countries that will be there at the time. It could be the nations there today. I don't know. We'll have to see. And then verse 44, 45, he talks about a future kingdom set up by the God of heaven. And that will be the Messiah's kingdom reigning on heaven and earth in the millennium and for all eternity. All this point in time, all this refers to the time of the Gentiles. The time of the Gentiles is a term talked about by Jesus, in fact. So if we go to Luke 21, 24, for context in Luke, his disciples are asking about the future and the end times and what's going to happen. And let's see, it's going to say, he's talking about the tribulation that's going to happen before the second advent. And 24 says, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. The time of the Gentiles is going to refer to the administration of the Gentiles as the rod of chastening upon Israel to further God's purpose concerning them. From Daniel's time on, the Jews aren't listening. They become a stubborn people, and God goes, I need people, I need to punish them and bring them back to me until they repent, right? And so he starts sending nations to conquer them and enslave them until they repent and turn back to him and follow him for another short time. So the times of the Gentiles, it starts, I would argue, in the days of Egypt, right? Because Egypt enslaves them, right? And next, it's going to be Assyria, right? And then, in Daniel's day, he's telling the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, hey, you're the head of gold. But that's really the third kingdom. Next will be the Medo-Persian Empire. Then after that, the Grecian Empire. Then the Roman Empire. If you don't believe me on those things, it'll all tie into later on in Daniel. Because if you don't understand this dream and the interpretation in Daniel chapter 2, you'll have a real heck of a hard time understanding the latter part of Daniel, because it all ties together. Let's see, the seventh world empire, this starts to get into a future tense even for us, present day. To point out verse 43, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. That's going to be the future Holy Roman Empire. That's, again, not actually the Roman Empire, but the countries in that area. So it'll be a new Roman Empire. And it will start peaceful, right? And then the Antichrist, and his kingdom, which will be the eighth kingdom, is going to come in and overtake it. So the statue has 10 toes. That represents the 10 kingdoms. If we go to Revelations 13, I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea. The beast is the Antichrist. The beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. Again, those horns, they're the same as the 10 toes in Daniel. Upon his horns, 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy, right? So it's all tying together. This is all a future prophecy as much as it is a present day interpretation for King Nebuchadnezzar. The ninth kingdom, it's the Christ coming back to rule over the heaven and earth forever and ever and ever. Nebuchadnezzar, he's super impressed with Daniel, either because he knows it's correct or because he was just happy that he got compared to a head of gold on a statue, and so he promotes him as his buddies.